Welcome to Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk 1180 for the very best in Saturday Talk Radio at 1 o'clock on 12:30 at 10 o'clock at 12:30 KGEO Saturday.
12:30 at 10, wasn't it?
Yeah, did I
or was it 10 at 12:30?
Yes, what am I going to do? 12:30 KGEO at 10 o'clock, and for the best in Wednesday Talk Radio on 1410 KERI on Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Your host is Clay Koerner, and I'm Marty Pay, and behind the big board we have Greg Held, our producer. Hey, Clay, that was a great show last week with Wayne Allen Root, the Libertarian Party VP, and a classmate of Barack Obama.
Well, not sure he was a classmate of Barack Obama because nobody knows if Barack Obama was there or not.
Well, how you can interview 400 people in the class and nobody remembers him, that kind of tells you something, doesn't it?
It certainly does.
In the second half, we had our Republican U.S. senatorial candidate, Elizabeth Emkin. What do you think of her?
I like Elizabeth. Unfortunately, personally, I don't think she stands a chance.
You know, it's funny. She was 24 points behind. Now she's only 13 points behind. So, you never know. It just depends on what the rest of the election looks like in November.
Depends if people really want to keep Feinstein in office.
Yes, she's been there since 1992.
And hasn't done anything.
Yeah. Today we have a great show I've been looking forward to. We're going to talk about a legend who died 50 years ago this month, Marilyn Monroe. Our guest in the second half hour is Sonny Thompson, star of Marilyn Forever Blonde. And our guest in the first half is Jim Baker, author of The Empty Glass, about the death of Marilyn Monroe. Jim, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
So, Jim, I can't wait to read your book. I've seen it, but I haven't had a chance to read it. What do you think? Was it a suicide or a homicide?
I think we can't say for sure, and I'm sorry not to be more definitive about that. I've done a lot of media surrounding this, and everybody wants the absolute answer. I can't give that answer, except to say that there are reasons why it could have been both. There's certainly not. There's certainly a lot of evidence in the case that would point to the very real possibility that it could have been a homicide.
So what happened that night? Let's go over that night.
Well, this is part of the problem with this case is there's so many different versions of what happened. It really depends on who you ask. The first version, that was the initial official version, was that her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, woke up around midnight, she said, went out into the hall, saw a light coming from underneath Marilyn Monroe's locked bedroom door, tried to rouse Marilyn Monroe, knocked on the door, couldn't get an answer, door was locked. She called the psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, Marilyn Monroe's psychiatrist. He came over, tried to get in the door, same thing happened. He went around the house to the window that looked in on her bedroom. He broke the window. He went in. He saw her on the bed, realized she was dead, called her physician, Hyman Engelberg. He showed up, and it took them, this was, say, 12:30, 12:45. They did not call the cops until 4:30 in the morning. And when the first officer who showed up on the scene, a guy named Jack Clemens, asked them, why didn't you call the cop? Why didn't you call us before? Why did you wait 4 hours? The doctor said, well, we needed to get permission first, and Jack said, permission from whom? And they said 20th Century Fox Publicity Department. That's where she was making her last film. Well, that's a little nuts. You don't call the cops, you call the publicity department at a film studio. And then, oddly enough, the next day, all of those folks changed the time frame from the discovery around 12:30 to 3:30 in the morning. So why?
So how did we find out that they changed it? I mean, is this something
because of the cop Jack had in his records and made the statement that the initial time frame was 12:30. The interviews that they gave to the LA Times the next day indicated that it was 3:30.
I guess this sounds like a Michael Jackson situation, doesn't it?
Yeah, it totally could have been. I mean, there's all kinds of that's just the beginning. For one thing, the housekeeper going down the hall, she initially said that the reason she went into the hall was because she needed to use the bathroom. Well, there was a bathroom through her bedroom. In other words, she could have gone through her bedroom into a bathroom. She did not need to go down the hall. Secondly, the light under the door, the carpet pile in her bedroom was so high that you could hardly close the door, so that when you closed the door. There was no way of seeing anything that was underneath it.
Well, now, I know this is just speculation, but why do you think they waited 4 hours? I mean, what do you think the rationale was?
Okay, here's my feeling about it. I feel that was it a homicide? Could she have, for instance, had the doctor come over and inject her with something because she was all panicked about whatever? Yes. So it could have been this accident where and there's reasons behind that, too, that I could go into later. There's reasons why it doesn't make total sense that she died because she herself swallowed a lot of pills. But I'll get to that later if you're interested.
Yeah.
My feeling about it is that you cannot definitively say that it was a homicide, but there's so much to indicate that something else was going on, and what I think that something else was a cover-up. I think it's just a matter. I don't think anybody can argue. I mean, some people will, but I don't think you can really legitimately, logically argue that Monroe was not having affairs with the Kennedy brothers, with both of them. And so if she died by accident, or if there was some weird thing that happened around 10 or 11 o'clock at night, once the body was discovered, I think these guys, all of whom knew she was having these relationships, would have absolutely tried to make sure that any evidence that was left behind surrounding those affairs was disappeared.
Mm-hmm. We're having a conversation with Jim Baker, author of The Empty Glass, the story about the death of Marilyn Monroe.
So, Jim, why do you think anyone would want to kill Marilyn? She was such a pleasant person.
Well, this is assuming, again, that we're going to say she was killed. And again, I wouldn't go so far as to say that's definitive. However, if, for instance, she was, assuming she was having, and I do assume she was having relationships with the Kennedys, if she knew a lot of stuff about them that they didn't necessarily want out, I mean, that's a motive.
You think it is? What about why the Kennedy brothers? Why not? How'd she end up with both brothers?
Well, again, one can't say exactly for sure, and I'm sorry to constantly hedge my bets here, but I mean, there's all kinds of different stories surrounding this. The version I believe, though, is that she, John F. Kennedy was a notorious. He would come to L.A. to stay at Peter Lawford's beach house, which was called the White House West. Peter Lawford was essentially a pimp for the president. So when the president would come to stay at his beach house in Santa Monica, Peter Lawford would make sure that the house was stocked with beautiful young actresses and cocktail waitresses and dancers and people who would basically, young women who would basically give it up for the president. It wasn't hard. And at some point, one of those young women was Marilyn Monroe. So he had what I believe and many others believe to have been a long kind of serious, an affair with her that lasted for a while. At some point, he realized she was a little bit unstable, and he did what he always did when he had a problem that he needed solved. He called his brother. Bobby was a fixer. So Bobby Kennedy went to L.A. with this attempt to get this kind of slightly, unstable actress away from the brother, and as a result, he fell in love with her himself, or he fell in lust with her, and then he engaged in an affair. So first she was rejected by JFK, and then at some point Bobby rejected her, and she went nuts.
I think her whole life she was rejected, it sounds like it.
By men, yes, but she also rejected men, too. I mean, she was having an affair with Arthur, when she was married to Arthur Miller, she was having an affair with Yves Montand on the set of Let's Make Love, so it's not as if she was perfect either.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that this seems to be a theme going through the Democratic presidents.
You could say that, yeah.
Sorry to throw that in, but just facts are facts.
Well, so you're saying Richard Nixon and George Bush weren't the type of people who would have affairs?
I haven't heard about them.
It's true.
If they
I don't know anything about George Bush in that regard, but Richard Nixon sure as hell wasn't.
No, Nixon was guilty of a lot of things, but I couldn't even imagine Nixon doing that.
Well, look at him.
Look at him, I like that. So, when we get back from the break, one of the things I'd like you to touch is the drugs in the bloodstream. I thought that was fascinating because how the heck could she actually have that much drugs in her bloodstream and be able to take more drugs? I mean, it just doesn't seem logical to me.
No, I agree.
So We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180.